hey, we've got good news and bad news. Bad news, you're going to lose this job. I'm like, cool. The great news is we have another opportunity. Do you want to do this? I start crying and I'm like, do I go back there? She was like, don't go back there. Get out of there.
Never talk to that woman again.
You niche down so much that all of a sudden you're not even a human. You're a brand, but you're not a human.
I feel like we're entering this era of authenticity.
We never have to worry about the algorithm if we're serving our audience. And that's the truth.
This is really the heart of how we've both built our businesses, is making connections.
How many times do we see people sacrifice their why in pursuit of it?
If you have a message to share, if you have a business and gifts to share with other people, there's going to be a point where you have to start putting yourself out there.
I'm not called to be everybody's leader. That's okay. But for the people that I am here to love and lead, I got to be laser sharp focused.
Well, Sarah, welcome to Powerhouse Women.
Thank you. I am so glad to be here.
Listen, this is the best part about having a podcast is all the new relationships that it brings. And I'm so excited to dive into your story because I was sharing with you, I've known of you, I've followed you, your story for years because my start began in network marketing.
Yeah.
And I am just so excited now to be catching up with this stage of the journey. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. And I've been following you and admiring you for years. So it's such an awesome opportunity to just connect in person.
And actually, that's like kind of a perfect place to start is I think as women, we probably do have these mutual admiration relationships, these opportunities for friendship that we don't even realize. And I think I'm grateful that I had reached out to a friend, said, hey, who should I be connecting with when I'm in this part of California? But how many other relationships are we maybe not building because we aren't taking the time to even just slide into your DMs and saying, hey, you may not know who I am, but I love your content. Thank you for what you're doing.
So true.
We could have been friends for years.
I know, that's true. But now we get the opportunity, fast forward.
Yes. And that's actually, it's something I want to dive in with you on a little bit later because this is really the heart of how we've both built our businesses is making connections.
Yeah.
But before we do that, for anyone who's new to your story, who doesn't know how you went from kindergarten teacher, right?
Yeah.
All the way to 8-figure entrepreneur, really like generating billions of dollars in sales through your company. I mean, that's kind of like a big gap in between.
Yeah.
So for someone who hasn't heard the story, how do you like to set the stage for Sarah pre-entrepreneurship to who you've grown into now?
I always say pressure promotes you. It's out of the camp of complacency and really into your destiny if you let it. I was a shy kindergarten teacher facing the loss of my job. I'm also from the Midwest, Michigan. And although it was the most requested teacher in the building, teacher tenure trumped performance. So because of the economy, Motown, Motor City, the recession of '08, schools were closing, families were moving, houses were up for foreclosure. And there I was going into the teacher's lounge and they were saying, well, you know, you're a low man on the totem pole, you're going to lose your job. So I really just started to look for extra opportunity to earn more money so I could pay the bills. And that was it. And during the time, I go and start freelancing for different skincare, cosmetics companies, making $20 an hour. Yes, I was the girl that was like passing out the samples and trying to pull you in. And it was so like different than anything I was used to, but I was like, it's a great way to make some extra cash just in case, and happen to be in the right place at the right time. So there I was, and we get a call one day from our account executive saying, hey, we've got good news and bad news. Bad news, you're going to lose this job. I'm like, cool. The great news is we have another opportunity. We're going to leave retail, go into direct sales. Do you want to do this? No, I knew nothing about it except for the fact that I said I would never, ever, ever do it. But my mom was a savvy serial entrepreneur. And she was like, Sarah, I know the stories of the people who work these businesses and really grow them. She's like, someday, like this will change your life. We've got to do this. So I'm the firstborn kid. I'm the compliant one. And I'm like, yes. So, you know, it's like, okay, sure, I'll do it. My mom told me to do it. So I did. And it absolutely changed our life. Went on to go and build billions of dollars of sales with that sales team. And now just really pouring into the industry that has really changed my life, which is my passion now. And I think the cool thing is like, you can take the teacher out of the classroom, but you can't take the classroom out of the teacher. Now I get to do what I love to do, just in a different way, just in coaching and training and pouring in, just making simple systems, helping people to unlock, and really like having it be my joy to see people succeed. Yes. So that's the story.
Oh my gosh. Well, I say that all the time when people will ask, what did you want to be when you were a kid growing up? The thing I would make my siblings play, they didn't have a choice because I was the oldest, yes. is we would play school. Same. And of course I was the teacher. And I actually thought that would be my career path. I ended up going more towards sales. But the other thing is the recession was the first time I ever said, I think I need a plan B.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because now we're in this economic time where there is some fear being sold to us. There's just conversations that things are going to change. But I can't help but remember back to the last time I remember that same sentiment in the world around. And that was the time that actually changed the whole trajectory of my life.
Yeah.
It sounds like the same for you.
Yes. And instead of looking at it as an obstacle, we looked at it as opportunity.
Yeah.
And that's where our business grew. It's incredible. But we have to be willing to make that pivot in order to get something we don't have, to just do the things we've never done before, but just become a student of what it is that we want to do, to learn and grow and be consistent. And it was so cool to just see the stories that unlocked in this season, which makes me actually really excited for the opportunity that we have now to see new businesses birth, to see people, you know, as we say, in direct sales, walking out their why, right? I mean, again, looking at as a time for opportunity and growth.
Yes, absolutely. So, okay, you were in this position where you sort of didn't have a choice to make this pivot.
Yeah.
Were you good at direct sales at first?
Oh my gosh, no.
Like, take us back to I mean, we all have them, right?
Yes.
But what were those early days like?
I remember walking up to a cosmetics counter because I thought, well, skincare, I'm in skincare,
Great.
right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to go and talk to this girl. And instead of making it about her, of course, I'm like, it's all about me and what I want to share, right? I mean, I didn't know. I was so excited. I didn't know better. I was in my young 20s and it was my first time doing anything like this. So I remember walking up, picking up this bottle of skincare. My hands are shaking, my knees are knocking, and I swear I saw stars. And I did like the verbal vomit, like, you know, did all the selling, you know, and she looks at me like a deer in headlights. And I remember just sitting there so humiliated. And I was like, how am I going to be successful in a business of networking if I'm afraid to talk to people? So I go in my car, call my mom, who is also my sponsor in the business. Okay, that will humble you. And I start crying and I'm like, do I go back there? She was like, don't go back there, get out of there.
Never talk to that woman again.
I pedaled to the metal, cried the whole way home. And I was like, how will I be successful in a people business when I'm afraid to talk to people? So, you know, it took me 3 months to find my first customer. Thank goodness I didn't quit. I just always looked around and I was like, if there are other people doing this successfully, surely I can learn from them and I can learn how to do this too.
So what really helped? What helped you? Because I want to start to unpack this conversation for everyone listening. You know, if you have a message to share, if you have a business and gifts to share with other people, there's going to be a point where you have to start putting yourself out there, whether it's online, whether it's talking to people in person. And I think that can just feel so intimidating, especially when it starts with a lot of rejection.
For sure. I think for me, it was really just being a student of my profession and really learning inside and out, but also too, just getting great at networking with other people. I always say, when you think about like, how did Oprah build her empire? On questions. Larry King, the king of questions, right? The number one thing that people want to talk about is themselves, right? And so I learned, instead of talking at that lady, what I needed to do was pay her a compliment, ask her a question, and get really great at making new connections, making new friends, and really prioritizing relationship over revenue, people over profit. And it was like, oh, that changed everything. All of a sudden, instead of feeling like I was chasing people down, I had people who actually wanted to do business with me because why? I was taking interest in them, which that changed absolutely everything. It changed everything, not just in business, but also in relationships too.
Yes. Okay. So break that down, because the mindset that we go into a conversation, let's say we're going out, we're going to a networking function, or we're just even connecting online. And the goal is to grow our businesses.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful. We want
Yes.
people to do that. Talk a little bit about the energy, the intention behind why we're connecting, and how, whether we're saying the words or not, that feeling of maybe profit over people,
Yes.
or I've got to make this sale in order to XYZ reach my financial goals. How does that start to show up? Because I actually think, and both of us coming from the network marketing industry, I feel like that industry gets sometimes a bad rep for maybe not training people
Yes.
how to effectively connect.
Yes.
But it's something that shows up in every single business, no matter what kind of business people are building. And when I look back in my own journey, it was the energy behind, the intention behind the actions. Even though my heart was pure,
Yeah.
if I was thinking about getting
Yes.
rejected or making it about me, people could feel that.
Yeah, it's so good. And the thing is, our business is our priority. It's not anybody else's. And our product, or the thing that we're selling or sharing, is only one solution to the problems they may be facing. And we go online with this presence of, here's the thing I want to sell. And it's like we're posting for a purpose, which is our own profit, right? It's our own gain.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden we're a constant commercial, and we wonder why our audience isn't growing, or people are leaving, right? They're hitting the mute or the unfollow button, and why the algorithm isn't working in our favor, because it became a constant sales pitch.
Mm-hmm.
The truth is if we're thinking about giving great value to people, right? Whether it's in person or even online, we never have to worry about the algorithm if we're serving our audience. And that's the truth, because I want to be the place that people check on purpose. So when I wake up each day, I'm thinking, how can I make her life easier or better today? What are the things that she's interested in? What are the problems she's trying to solve? And the goal really is, through building relationships, it's casting a wider net. It's building a greater audience.
Yeah.
And then when you have something to sprinkle in, you have more people who might take interest. And I always share this example as I'm coaching and training. I'll say, imagine if you were doing an in-home event, right? And you were sharing something, anything new that you were launching. Would you rather have 10 people in a room or 100 people in the room? Surely when you have more people, you now have more people to take action. But again, that comes from being very intentional about building an audience.
Mm-hmm. Do you have it could even be a system you train your team, it could be a system you use yourself, but how do you balance the type of value, the type of content you're putting out? Because at some point, here's, I think, the other place people go is, then we're afraid to promote or to ask for the sale, or to say, hey, here's how you can work with me. Is there like a balance to it that you found a perfect formula?
For sure. It's really 90% of the time that I am looking at. So let's say if you're doing 10 posts, that it's 9 times out of 10 that I'm sharing something that could add value to your life, something that is going to make your life easier or better, something that's going to inspire you, motivate you, make you want to share it with somebody else. That's really the key. And then really focusing on, like, that's what's happening in the feed, and any quote unquote selling, which is more just kind of like subtle selling, is really happening in stories at day to day, like that highlight reel of our life. And just really making sure. But so many people that I coach, they do it absolutely backwards. And again, they're wondering, why am I getting no customers? I'm talking about my product every day. And it's actually the exact opposite that we want to do. Is we want to serve people every day, cast a wider net, and just sprinkle in what we're doing in between.
Okay, I love that term you used, subtle selling.
Yes.
Because that is an art form.
It is.
It is an absolute art form. You are magnificent at it.
Thank you.
Talk about what that looks like if someone is hearing that. Because the thing is, I bet we're responding to people subtle selling to us all the time.
Yes.
And don't even realize it because it's subtle.
Yeah.
So what does that look like? Break it down.
Okay, so I have to ask you, and then of course I'll tell everybody like how old I am. Have you watched MTV The Hills with Kristen Cavallari?
100%.
Okay.
39, about to be 40.
Okay,
so
okay.
You're speaking my language.
It was like, that was the show. But now she has this brand, Uncommon James.
Yeah.
And if you notice her in stories, what is she doing? She's not like, buy this necklace for, $99.99, whatever it costs. She instead is talking about her day. She's putting on the jewelry, and she's showing not selling, right? And she's making these impressions on you. And I've seen my friends who are in direct marketing doing the same thing, taking the supplements, doing the thing. And instead of constant selling, they're creating these impressions, because the reality is when you see it enough, eventually you ask, what is that? Or how can I get my hands on that too? And it's really testimonials, showcasing results, etc. Instead of being a constant commercial, posting links, specials, etc. It's really just adding in. And again, adding in as value. So sometimes I might be like, here's my quick makeup routine. But hey, by the way, the best cosmetic is great looking skin. Again, it's like those subtle shares versus constantly selling.
Yes. Which if I think back to even, and I always encourage people to do this, whatever you sell, if it's a product, if it's a service, if it's a coaching program, think of the last time you bought that thing. And if you've never been a customer of something similar, that's probably step one. But think back to what had you say, yes, I need that. Yes, I want to work with that person. And it's almost never for me, the person who is selling directly, or sometimes it's maybe a part of a launch, but it's because they've already built the trust. They've built the relationship with me just by showing the kind of value that they give.
Yes.
So I love this. And I think the other thing that I see it got in my way for a long time. I'm curious if this has ever been a struggle for you, is that means that part of our duty, part of our job is to show up, show our face online, to show our gifts, to share our message. Have you ever struggled with that?
Oh yeah.
Because I have.
Yes. There are times where I wanted to hide. I remember after having both of my babies, and I was like, oh, I don't feel like being on camera. But again, when I decided to just make that shift and show up, right? And think about that serving, right? Who am I here to serve? That changed everything, because I could just show up as I was. I remember before kids, I would go, and it was back in the days of the little like flip cameras, right?
Yes.
Where we'd go and we'd record a million videos in a row, and you'd change your outfits a million different times. And now we just go live. Half the time I'm like business in the front, party in the back. I comb the front of my hair, and I've got who knows what's going on back here. I've got a nice top on, pajama pants on the bottom, whatever the case may be. But now I just think, whose life are we going to change today? And that's it. And I don't make it about me. I make it about adding value to the other person. And that has just changed the way also that I show up for other people too.
Yeah. I was at an event recently, and it was a question from the audience basically about that, about how do you get over that? How do you get over that narrative in your head about just wanting it to be perfect, or over concerned about how you're looking, showing up? And it really occurred to me, the shift I had to make was realizing that when I was stopping myself from showing up because of those thoughts, I was making it about me.
Yeah.
And it's just not about me.
Yeah. That's it.
It really isn't.
Yeah.
Which is easier said than done.
Yeah.
But I also feel like, and I want to hear your thoughts on this, because I feel like we're entering this era of authenticity.
Yes.
Less filters.
Yes.
Less of the curated perfection in the feed, even more authenticity.
Yeah.
So what do you feel is the balance between authenticity, but sharing it from a powerful place where it really has the impact that we want? Because I do think there's a fine line. Yeah. But I'm all here for the era of authenticity and less perfection. I
agree. And even too, often as I'm sharing how to be successful on social media, I'll say, we sometimes tell people, you niche down so much that all of a sudden you're not even a human. You're a brand, but you're not a human. Well, we are a personal brand, like what you and I do, right? And I always say, we do two things for me in my business. I sell a product, but also a lifestyle. And so do I believe that we can show our kids and, our fur babies and all the things? Yes. I might change the way that I quote it. I might change the way that I share it so that it can add value to another person. But man, when I've got a cute picture of my kids and I'm excited about it, I post it. And it's so cool because when people meet me at events, or when they consider, making that connection with me, they're like, I followed you for years and I feel like I really know you. And it's like, they know my kids' names, and we're able to make that connection. And again, going back to that, people do business with those they know, like, and trust. And so I think that's important, as a personal brand, right? And maybe it's not always showing up in the feed, and maybe it's just some things that we share in stories that we share we're a real life person too. You know, I was thinking about the other day, Jamie Kern-Lima, and just watching and seeing how she shows up and how we see her life and her friends and her family, which is such a powerful thing. She's a powerhouse. But when she shows up, there's a warmness about her, a familiarity about her that makes you love her even more and go, what's the next book? This is going to change my life. Why? Because she's also, besides a businesswoman, she's a mom. How do we know that? By what she shows us.
Yes. Okay. That's so big, because at the end of the day, it is that truth that we buy from people.
Yes.
Even when I'm buying from a big brand, I love when I get to know some of the personalities behind the brand or a powerful founder story. And we can all start there, right? But that also feels a lot like the most vulnerable thing for us to do sometimes. Right. But I'm noticing more and more how the more that I share that, the more I weave it in, the more it does draw people in, especially when I'm willing to share the tougher things. Yes. Right? The things that still are a struggle.
For sure. Because now you're relatable and people go, oh, you know, I like her even more. But also too, your story, your testimony makes way for what's possible in other people too. And I think that's the most important thing.
Okay. So speaking of stories and testimonies, one of my favorite things about you is just your heart for giving.
Thank you.
For generosity. And I want you to share, how did that look in the beginning? So before you were making the level of income where it's easy for people to say, of course you're giving in big ways now. How has that evolved for you and your husband?
It's actually been the thing that has fueled us and motivated us, which is what kept us from quitting in the early days. We decided every month when we would get our check mid-month that we would do growth goals for our business, but also tie them to giving goals, which was super cool. You know, growth goals, it's easy to quit when you don't achieve them. But when you have something attached that adds emotional meaning to you, you're like, I got to keep going. I can't stop doing this. So in the beginning, we would give a portion of our check, and it would look like buying a family who needed groceries, sending 5 kids to fine arts camp. And it was cool because as our income grew, so did our impact. Eventually, we went on to partner with friends of ours. They have an organization called Angel House where we open up orphanages overseas. And they challenged us, do your first 100-child home. And we were at the place where we could write the check and do it. And it's cool. We actually do that with our kids every year. We open up a home overseas. It provides housing, education, nutrition support. We don't just give, we go. But every year at Christmas time, they open up the books with their brothers and sisters' names. And, you know, it's bringing our family into that as well. And so we also, and this was a really amazing story, and I know I got to share this at the event we were at the other day, was we were able to gift our first home to a family in need. And it's such a cool story because we had actually moved from our starter home to our dream home when our business started taking off. And that was, remember, in the downturn of the economy, the recession of 2008. And everyone told us at our young age that we should foreclose on the house. We bought it for like $190,000. It would have sold for $120,000, and everyone's like, walk away. Every house on our street was up for foreclosure. And we just knew that we were called to be faithful. And we decided not to do that, that we would remain good stewards of everything that we had while we were able to do that. And I remember this family driving by as we were moving out. Literally, the moving truck was there. And they said, excuse me, are you selling this house or renting the house? We didn't even know yet. And we're like, do you know somebody? They're like, us. Like, we're looking to rent on the street. And we're like, sure, you can rent it. So we rented to them. And it was really neat. They rented faithfully for about a year. The husband actually came down with a terminal illness. And I took a walk one day, and my husband took a walk that day. And we didn't know what each other were going to come back and say. He just said, I really felt like stirring, there's something that I need to share with you. And I was like, me too. So we come together and I was like, you go first. He's like, you go first. And we're like, we need to gift them this house because we can, you know? And so I remember calling them on Christmas Day. And this woman, she was weeping, and she said, I walked in your house, and from the very first day I felt in my spirit that someday this would be my home. And so the beautiful thing is, it's like, again, it's being good stewards of what we have. But when people hear those stories, they'll often say to me like, I wish I could do that. But what they don't understand is we started somewhere, right? And so it's like, I believe if God gives seed to the sower, I have generosity in my heart. it's never going to run dry. So we started in the area where we were able to be faithful, right? And as we were faithful, he was faithful. It was like we continued to see growth in our business. And again, it's like as our income grew, just so did that impact, just in, a different scale. That's it. But again, the same great impact in the hearts and the lives of other people, just as excited as that mom was, a single mom, that we were able to say, hey, we're going to send your 5 kids to fine arts camp, So it's being faithful in the season that we're in with what we have.
How has that portion of it, the generosity that has come along with the success, even when it was at the beginning stages, how has that impacted the way you show up in your business?
I don't take personal rejection personally at all. I don't even look at it that way. I just think, well, it's personal preference. And so when I go through hard things, whether it's somebody who tells me no, somebody who quits, or even in a position with leadership and a lot of women where you get, jealousy, envy, all of these things just kind of comes with the territory. I'm like, well, they're feeding a lot of orphans. It's okay. It's like, it's not about me,
It's such a powerful reframe.
It's true.
Wow.
That's my husband and I say that all the time. We're like, that's okay. They don't think the world of us, not everybody, we're not called to lead everybody. We're not called to be everybody's leader. Okay, that's fine. But they're still blessing a lot of orphans. They're still doing a lot of great good in our business, whatever the case may be. And I'm like, it's not personal rejection, it's personal preference. That's it. And just reframing things differently, because instead of looking at the immediate outcome, I'm sitting there and I'm looking at that little book of the cute little kids that I open every Christmas with my kids. And there's nothing that's going to move me from that. Absolutely nothing. People could say or do anything to me. And it's not to say that it didn't take a lot of years of getting there. Trust me.
Yeah.
I remember times where people would say something, I was like crushed for 2 weeks. But now again, instead of looking at these immediate situations, I look at the overall picture. Like, why am I doing this? Who am I here to impact? I'm not called to be everybody's leader. That's okay, right? But for the people that I am here to love and lead, I got to be laser sharp focused on those people and on those things.
It was one of the greatest gifts from my time in network marketing was the conversation around anchoring my goals to a bigger why, a bigger purpose, a bigger vision. And it is something that I've brought into no matter what business that I'm building. But the other thing about your story that I think is important for people to understand is you've been with your company now 15 years.
Yeah.
And I think I've been in business long enough now to watch a lot of people start and stop.
Yeah.
I've started and stopped things. How much has that portion of it, the commitment, the longevity to sticking with it and continuing to hone your skills, continuing to pour into others? I think I just want to unpack this conversation because so many of us are probably giving up before our season of bounty, our season of blessing, before our big breakthrough, and we might be right on the other side of it.
Yeah.
So what encouragement do you give to the people who you mentor, who are just in one of those seasons where it's pretty easy to just say it would be easier to throw in the towel right now?
For sure. Leaders play the long game. And I remember just in a really difficult time of leadership in my business. And it's interesting. I studied the story of leadership of a man named Moses, and many people, regardless of faith, they know the story of the promised land, right? Could you imagine? It's like, okay, here's your destiny. This is where you're supposed to go.
Yeah.
And then you look at the story, it's all the way from Exodus through Numbers, that the Israelite people were like, well, wait, I want to go back to that. And what was back there was never better. What was ahead was better. But it was like every time they faced pressure, they would take 2 steps forward and 1 step back, always forgetting like the times that they were provided for, the times they were protected. But again, it was this idea of like, wait, that felt better, right? And when you fast forward the story, sadly, only 2 out of 2 million actually made it when they get to the end. And they're like, oh my gosh, there's giants in the land. And there was 2 who said, but God is greater than the giants, right? Like he who is in me, but also too, like what is in me is greater than all of the problems that I'm facing. And man, if the rest would have just pressed forward, again, back to that idea of pressure promotes you. Instead of looking at it as, oh my gosh, I'm about to lose my teaching job, I'm like, surely there's got to be another opportunity. And I'll even feel so secure, like in the place that I'm at in my life where I'm like, my business is not my idol, that no matter what season I'm in, no matter what happens in the economy, in a company, whatever the case may be, it's like, I'm always going to use that as a springboard for the very next thing. But I think, for the person who's just starting out, I would say, it doesn't matter what you do. You're going to face pressure in any business, any company, as you're finding, your journey of success. So it's like, find a great mentor, be so laser sharp focused on why you're doing it in the first place.
Yeah.
And again, really play the long game.
Yes. That's such a beautiful visual for that lesson.
Yeah.
And how much has mentorship played a role for you in your success? Because you mentioned that.
Everything from having people that can mentor spiritually, my husband and I in our marriage, as parents, as a leader in business, you can only go as far as you've actually let people pour into you, right? It's like, I always say to people like, okay, you're pouring into so many people, who's pouring into you? There's a great story, and I've shared this story before, the story of the starving baker, where you hear about this amazing baker and he's down the street and you go in and you watch him do his thing, and he's feeding the guests and he's tending to the cash register, and you start to notice, he's alarmingly thin. He is doing so much for other people that he is forgetting to feed himself. And we oftentimes get in that place. We're the starving baker. We feel hollow, we feel fake, and we're not fake at all. We've just gotten so busy in the doing, right, that we've actually stopped allowing other people to pour into us. And I will never be at that place where I feel like I've reached the top. There's nothing more to learn, right? It's like, in humility, like, we are able to actually learn and grow and move ahead to the next season in life. And I'm like, man, if there's anything that I can learn about parenting, I want to learn it. Anything that I can learn about being a great wife, leader, I want to learn it. So always being humble enough to submit myself to that leadership and say like, hey, here's this area like that we need to grow, and taking that and learning those lessons along the way too.
Okay, so in that spirit, what would you say is the biggest lesson you're in the middle of learning right now as a business owner, a mom, a wife, anything?
Yeah, that sometimes you have to go slow in order to go further, right? Or faster. I think, the really difficult thing about today's society that we're living in, and we see everything on social media, is this like hustle culture mentality. And I just have looked and I'm like, man, I want to do things differently. Oftentimes when I work with people, I'm like, what is your why? And it is usually family is their focus, right? With retire the spouse or be with the spouse or be at home with the kids. But then how many times do we see people sacrifice their why in pursuit of it? Time is the currency of relationship. How do people know that we love them? It's the time we pour into them. Now, it's not to say that there's going to be times that I'm away from my kids, but really balancing and saying like, am I there for the important things? How do I know my children love them? It's the time that we have together. And so really, like, for me, it's like, from a practically speaking, setting hours of operation, 3:30 comes, my phone is off. There is nothing that is an emergency in my business at all by any means. I'm like, phone's off, kids are home. Like, we're being intentional. This is where we are, and just really making sure that I don't lose sight of the very reason why I started this, but also too realizing that there's seasons for everything too. I've got a girlfriend, and I know you know her, Brooke Thomas, and she's amazing. Yeah. Just pouring into women, building these incredible organizations. And she has 2 grown children. And I look at her and I admire all of the things that she's doing and been able to do. And then I realize someday, I've got little kids. There's a season for me to do all of that too. And right now it's dealing with the little boo-boos and the, I got hurt on my scooter and all of the things. And so it's like different seasons of life for where we're at, in our life. Yeah.
And at the simple idea of understanding that everything is a season.
Yes.
That's so beautiful. So you said earlier before we started recording, you're working on another book.
Yes.
So that's a season that you're heading into.
Yes.
How are you making time for that? Because you're leading a big team. You are a mom of littles. What does that look like practically when you have a new big goal? Maybe it's the book right now. How do you start to make that work and still maintain that life. I don't even want to use the word balance because that's kind of a mystical fairy, but how do you make it work for yourself and still give yourself permission to pursue these big goals?
Number one, focusing on one thing at a time. I have a laundry list of great ideas and big things I want to do.
Businesses.
To take over the world. Literally, it's like there's 10 at any given time. And it was interesting. At one point, I was trying to pursue all of the things. And I remember sitting with my husband. I'm like, we need to look at our top 2 profit sources and really just focus on growing those and stop trying to add on all the things. But then there's special projects of things that I'll do where I'm just taking one thing at a time. But one of the biggest things, I read that book by Dan Martell, Buy Back Your Time. Oh, it's a great book. And I was like, okay, I need to get help. I can't be superwoman and do everything. And it's interesting. So practically speaking, keep in mind, when I was a teacher, I was earning $1,100 every 2 weeks at $100 a year budget. And my husband was building a landscape business in the midst of a recession. So to say that we were frugal is an understatement. So sometimes I actually have to like really work on that because I'm like, wait, I'm going to pay somebody. Then I'm going to make less money. Right. And I'm kind of doing the math in my head and I'm like, that doesn't really make sense. And I found myself at a place where I really started expanding my personal brand. I was so busy. I felt like, oh my gosh, at any given moment I could break. And I remember it was just like a 1 month where I had a lot going on. And then I was like, I need help. I need to hire some people. I need to delegate so I can stay in my area of creative genius, doing the things I love to do, which for me is teaching, coaching, training. That lights me up. But doing the things like, you know, all the back end work and, you know, all of these things, I was like, I need an integrator. So what did I do? I hired somebody. And you know, the coolest thing, again, I was doing all the backwards math. Not only did it free me up and bring me such freedom and peace and joy, like it brought the joy back, but we actually found the projects that we worked on doubled the month that they started. And we're going, oh my gosh, the business is growing, therefore making you more profitable, but also just bringing back the joy. So sometimes it's like in my type A personality, nobody else can do it like me, right? It's
no one can.
No one. So I have to force myself to make the list and go, what are the things that you must do that require your voice? And then what are the things that you can outsource? And again, I want to speak to the person who's just starting. Like, what does that look like? For me, in the beginning, when I was a teacher, I was hiring somebody to clean my house. Even if it was just twice a month, I was like, those are 2 Saturdays that I can really use to build my business. I don't love to clean, you know, like I'm not great at it.
Doesn't bring me any joy.
Yes, I'm going to find somebody else to do it. And now I had 2 full free days that I could actually focus on building and doing what I love. So I think it's just remembering, like, listen, you don't get brownie points for like doing your own dishes or going to get your own groceries. Like, hey, I'm so thankful for Instacart, you know, like all the things.
I have not seen the inside of a grocery store since 2020.
Me neither. And it's okay. It doesn't make me less of a woman, less of a wife, less of a mom. It just means that I'm at a more peaceful place in my life.
Yeah. And there is so much pressure, you know. I don't know about you, but oldest child of 3, and I grew up with the most amazing mother who dedicated her life to raising us. Yeah. So if I'm trying to compare myself to what my upbringing looked like and bring that into who I am today, it actually just doesn't, it's not the same. Yeah. And the goals aren't the same.
Yes.
And I really dealt with a lot of guilt around starting to outsource, especially things within the home.
Yeah.
And had to really do that same math in my head of, even if it frees me up to be a more present wife for my husband, because I'm not stressed trying to manage all the things in my life, plus the things that I was managing within our home. And obviously he helps as well, but it was really tough. So did you ever struggle with that? The financial piece, or just the control that
for sure.
we both acknowledged, but
for sure. And it's the idea of like feeling like nobody else can do it better. And it's like, wait a minute, it actually makes me better at the things that I really love.
Yeah.
And like for me to just like sit and pour into my kids and just have all that much more time. So again, it's like just reframing the way we look at things, even reframing the way that we budget things too, going, okay, so maybe it's a little less from here, but a little bit more peace and a little bit more joy and a little bit more time, because time is something that unfortunately we don't get more of. It only becomes less and less, right? As we live our life more and more. So I'm like, whatever's left, man, that's the thing that I want to make the most impact.
Yes. That reminder alone, in that conversation of starting to allow more help, starting to invest in more help so that you can show up the way that you want to, but also you can impact more people.
It's true. We can make more money, but we can't get back time. That's it. We can't make up more time, but we can make more money all day long. So again, going back to that idea of like, there's seasons for everything. There's times for everything, but it's focusing on what truly matters most. And it's like, okay, we're doing all the things, but who are we really doing it for?
Yeah. Okay. So what are you most excited about in this next season coming up for you?
Oh man. So a few things. We have started a mastermind for leaders that are in network marketing. That has been my joy. I really got to a place in my business where I was like, it's not about the next thing, the next rank, the next prize. You know, you get to a place where you're like, there's not more that I need, but who more can I pour into? And true success is really about bringing other people to the places that they've been longing and dreaming to go. So I got to a point, it was actually last kind of New Year's, goal setting. And I was like, what is my why? Like, why am I doing the things that I'm doing? Because people look and they're like, man, you could have retired in your 30s. You would have been fine. Right. And I'm like, I just know that I'm here to make a greater impact. So I really started to ask, like, what does that look like? And I heard one word, which is legacy. And it is bringing other people to the place that they've been longing and dreaming to go. So just really making an impact on a leadership level. I love John Maxwell. And he says, I add value to leaders who add value to leaders. And like for me, I want to multiply leaders who multiply leaders. That to me leaves legacy. And then of course, the legacy that I leave with my family, that is the most important thing. Just being the most intentional wife and mother that I can be in every season. Last season it was big brother with baby brother. Now they're two brothers that are fighting all the time. So learning how to navigate that season. So wish me luck on that. That's a whole new ball game.
All the boy moms out there.
Oh my word.
Help a sister out.
Yeah, that's right. It's true. So if anybody has tips, they got to let me know. But no, truly it's a whole new season of just navigating life and family and all the things, but just really a deep desire to do it with excellence.
Yeah. You have used that term a few times, and I think even just in our before we turned on the microphones, excellence. How much has that been a guiding light or a core value for you and your business?
Yeah. Well, it's how you do anything is how you do everything, and it's just that decision of, I won't always be the best at it, but I'm always going to be a student of it. I'm always going to be learning and growing and doing my best. And that's one of the core values that really is important to me with my kids. I used to teach kindergarten and first grade. So I go to the conferences and I hear everything. And it's kind of like Charlie Brown, because there's certain things that I'm listening for. Is he a great human? Is he a kind friend? Is he working hard? And for me, it's like, we don't ever talk about grades, although my son does really well in school. But we never talk about it. I'll say to him like, hey buddy, thanks so much for trying hard. And I think that's something like you and I as entrepreneurs that we can see. It's like hard work and being great with people, building great relationships can take you really far in life. So it's just maintaining that excellence in all we do and trying our best in every area of life, knowing that we're not always going to get it right, right? And there's a safe place to land when we don't, but doing our best in everything that we're putting our hand to.
Oh, I love that. Because it's very different than perfectionism or this unrealistic standard.
That's it.
But you don't have to lower the bar on yourself and the work that you're doing in the world.
Yeah.
I feel like you are such the epitome of that balance between having grace for yourself in the process while always pursuing excellence. And I'm so grateful that we got to connect in real life.
I know.
So if people want to connect with you, if they want to know more about your mastermind or just follow along in your journey, where's the best place for them to do that?
SarahRobbins.com, which an H, the right way of Sarah, and Robbins with 2 B's, or they can find me on Instagram or Facebook.
Amazing. So I have one final question, and this is a fun one, especially for women who just have accomplished a lot And I don't know if this is something you have or have not struggled with. I have not always been great at stopping to acknowledge myself in the process. Even the small wins in between the bigger successes that get celebrated on Instagram. So we just call those your powerhouse moments. It can really be anything big or small that you want to take a moment and celebrate yourself for. So when I ask, what's a recent powerhouse moment that you've had that you want to celebrate right now, what is the first thing that comes to your mind?
Oh man, I think it's just, we had our company convention and just seeing that auditorium just filled with so many smiling faces and thinking that we had a hand in just impacting hundreds of thousands of women and their lives and their families. It's why I show up the way I do and don't just, collect the residual check, like continue to pour in and do the very thing that I coach and train other people to do. It's like being in the trenches with them, but it just makes me so proud to see other people, as they walk out their why.
And to be able to see it visually in a room full of people and realize that actually is only a percentage of the lives you've touched.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful. Sarah, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I loved our time together.